Good day. My name is David Wild, and this is the third part of a three-part lecture on Chapter 8 on Strategic Thinking and Planning from Connect Master Management 2.0. Let's talk about the competitive environment for the organization. Another reason why strategic decisions are exciting and complex is because they occur in a competitive environment. This is one of the main sources of uncertainty that firms face. Firms compete for customers, for talented employees, and for financial and other resources in various markets. This means the performance outcomes of a strategic decision can hinge upon the decisions and actions of rival firms competing for the very same customers, employees, suppliers, and so on. Strategic thinking requires that managers are able to put themselves in the shoes of a competitor to understand how they will compete, and this will enhance the success of the manager's own decisions and actions. This requires assessing a competitor's goals, assumptions, strategy, and capabilities to better appreciate its behavioral predispositions. Considering a competitor's goals aids in understanding whether the competitor is satisfied with its current performance, whether it is likely to change strategy, and how strongly it will respond to outside events. The assumptions a competitor makes about itself and the other companies in its industry can create certain biases or blind spots about customer preferences or market changes. Managers can construct a competitor response profile by answering four questions. First, is the competitor satisfied with its current position? Second, what likely moves or strategy shifts will the competitor make? Third, where is the competitor vulnerable? And finally, fourth, what will provoke the greatest and most effective retaliation by the competitor? Conducting full-scale competitor intelligence requires a large amount of publicly available data on current events, such as financial reports, analyst coverage, look at the business press, etc., as well as deep historical information on firms and the backgrounds of their managers. Companies themselves can carry out the collection and compilation of such information to develop a competitor intelligence system, or they can rely on consulting firms for assistance in performing such a task. The outcome of such a competitor analysis would be something like what you see in Figure 2, taken from the book and which you see on your screen now, where you would look at the various primary competitors for a given firm and then break down, after the review of all the information, what the goals of each competitor are, what the assumptions about the competitors are, what their current strategy would be, and what the capabilities of each competitor are at present. So, in summary, in looking at the competitive environment, strategic decisions are important because they occur in an ever-changing competitive environment in which the actions of rivals can potentially affect the profitability a firm achieves. Firms engage in competitor intelligence to understand competitors' abilities and incentives to undertake offensive or defensive actions. A final subject for this chapter is in coping with uncertainties in strategic decisions. In dealing with rivals' potential actions and responses, or other sources of uncertainty, firms try to cope with uncertainty in different ways. Some firms adopt a defensive stance to environmental threats, hanging on to what has worked in the past and making incremental refinements to the firm's operations. Other firms have exhibited a reactive stance, making adjustments only when forced to do so by the external environment. Still, other firms might be considered analyzers, or firms that actively benchmark other rivals, analyze what works for them, and imitate what appears to be successful. Firms that try to create their own futures are called prospectors. Uncertainty makes it important for a firm to look into the future to try to understand the firm's opportunities and risk. However, uncertainty also makes it hard to do so and can make it important for a firm to be flexible at the same time. The ways in which a firm might plan for strategic decisions and the effectiveness of these efforts depend partly on the level of uncertainty a firm faces. A manager can engage in sensitivity analysis to examine how different projected sizes of the market will have an impact on sales and profits. Still more complicated is a situation in which the firm might confront various scenarios involving multiple types of uncertainty. Unlike traditional planning that tries to identify the most likely or expected situation to come up with the best strategy, scenario planning handles uncertainties better by identifying many possibilities and making specific decisions while building in flexibility to respond to contingencies that might emerge. Scenario planning often begins with a core issue. This is followed by an identification of driving forces in the external environment and identification of critical uncertainties. The next stage is constructing scenarios, which is often done by taking two uncertainties at a time and combining them in tables with 4 cells each. Once scenarios are constructed, managers identify the implications of each scenario, including the firm's vulnerabilities, gaps in its resources and capabilities, alternative strategies, and critical decisions to make. Managers then use them in evaluating strategic alternatives to determine how attractive or unattractive a strategic alternative is under the different scenarios. Ideally, a strategic alternative will be robust or pay off well regardless of the scenario that emerges. Often, however, significant risk exists because a strategic alternative will be unattractive under one or more scenarios. Managers therefore try to build in strategic flexibility, or the ability to shift course and alter investments and operations to deal with changing conditions. So, in summary on coping with the uncertainties in strategic decisions, uncertainty is a key feature of strategic decisions, and many forms of uncertainty affect the plans that firms develop. Some firms might adopt a defensive or reactive stance when faced with uncertainty, while others are more proactive or attempt to analyze how uncertainty affects their organizations. Scenario planning is one method that managers use to consider how uncertainties might affect whether a strategic decision will be effective under different conditions playing out in the firm's environment. And with that, we end the 3-part lecture on Chapter 8 on strategic thinking and planning.